Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another Bible study. We're continuing the Harmony of the Gospel series. We'll be in Mark chapter 6, verses 14 through 29. We're going to read of John the Baptist's execution and then Herod's reaction to Jesus. We're going to start with verses 17 through 29 and then actually go back to verses 14 through 16, and you'll see why in a minute. But let's look at verses 17 through 29. For Herod himself had given orders to have John arrested, and he had him bound and put in prison. He did this because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he had married. For John had been saying to Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." So Herodias nursed a grudge against John and wanted to kill him. But she was not able to, because Herod feared John and protected him, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. When Herod heard John, he was greatly puzzled, yet he liked to listen to him. Finally, the opportune time came. On his birthday, Herod gave a banquet for his high officials and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. When the daughter of Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests. The king said to the girl, "Ask me for anything you want, and I'll give it to you." And he promised her with an oath, "Whatever you ask, I will give, up to half my kingdom." She went out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask for?" "The head of John the Baptist," she answered. At once the girl hurried in to the king with the request, "I want you to give me right now the head of John the Baptist on a platter." The king was greatly distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he did not want to refuse her. So immediately sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. The man went, beheaded John in the prison, and brought back his head on a platter. He presented it to the girl, and she gave it to her mother. On hearing of this, John's disciples came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. Now, let's start with Herod here. There are several Herods mentioned in the New Testament. We've covered this before, but this particular Herod was Herod Antipas, Antipas, the son of Herod the Great. This Herod was a governor over the province of Galilee as well as the area of Perea. Palestine was divided into four territories at this time, and Philip, Herod's brother, ruled Trachonitis and Idumea. Herod here, Antipas, he was a builder. He built the city of Tiberias, and he oversaw other great architectural projects during his reign. He was married to Herodias, that we learn here, and he had actually divorced his own wife. Herod Antipas had divorced his own wife in order that he might marry his brother's wife, Herodias. Uh, Again, Philip was his brother, the governor of the other areas. But I'm sure that bid well with his brother, him marrying his brother's wife. But anyway, John the Baptizer condemned this relationship between Herod and Herodias. So Herodias nursed a grudge, a great grudge against John the Baptist. John confronted the two for committing adultery, while John was probably the only one who was telling Herod the truth about this illicit relationship. You know, the truth hurts sometimes, especially when it comes to sin, your own sin, and someone confronting you with it. So, Herodias in particular took this personal, real personal. Herod had John in prison in what was called Machaerus, a fortress near the Dead Sea, in order to try to shut him up and, well, keep him away from Herodias, and keep her away from him. While Herod did what he could to protect this man that he really sort of respected, he knew he was a righteous and holy man, but he kept him in custody, and Herodias was out for blood and wouldn't stop until she could find a way to get John out of the picture. And Herod actually uh, really feared John and his influence over the Jewish people as well. His fear of this man as a prophet caused him to really protect him against any attempt of his angry wife. But the day came when Herodias would get her chance at having John executed. She plotted and actually used her own daughter from Philip to fulfill her dark desire. The girl here was named Salome. She was the niece of Herod and again the daughter of his brother Philip. She performed her, we have to assume, a suggestive dance to entertain Herod and all of his guests from Galilee. Herod was so pleased with this performance, and everybody else was, that he rashly promised basically anything she wanted, up to half of his kingdom. So she rushed to her mom's side. What do I ask for? And of course, Herodias, nursing that grudge, wanted John's head. So she requested John's execution. And she wanted John's head on the platter so that she could see with her own eyes that this man was dead, that had confronted her and him about the sin. And Herod, well, he was between kind of a rock and a hard place of his own design, albeit, but he had made this oath to this girl in front of all of his guests. What would he do? To save face, he felt he had to keep his word. Perhaps his guests joined in with uh, these evil women against John to encourage this murderous act. Uh, Herod was caught by his own rash words, a trap of his own doing. He would have been greatly embarrassed in front of his guests if he had denied her request. Words are powerful things, aren't they? We better take care how we use them. They can lead you into great sin and catch you in a trap. James says quite a bit about the tongue and our words. In James chapter 3, starting verse 2, he said, we all stumble in many things. If anyone is never at fault in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to keep his whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships for as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boast. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Words are powerful, folks. Be careful what you say. In the end, John the Baptizer was executed and his severed head was delivered to Herodias via Salome because Herod misused some words and got caught in a trap of his own doing. You know, Herodias might have silenced John, but little did she know someone much, much greater and holier was now on the scene. One who Herod even thought might have been John the Baptizer raised from the dead. But we know he's Jesus. Another lesson we can learn here, even though Herod sort of respected John's integrity, uh, he had John killed because of this thing called peer pressure from his family and peers here at this party. What do you do under pressure? Such peer pressure. It often shows who we really are. Are we really the person we claim to be or think we are? Do you allow peer pressure to get the best of you, even when you know what you're doing is the wrong thing? If so, maybe you need to change your peers. Now, let's go back to verses 14 through 16 of Mark chapter 6. And this is really a prequel it's actually the end result, okay, of what happened there. It says, King Herod heard about this, for Jesus' name had become well known. Some were saying, John the Baptist has been raised from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are at work in him. Others said he is Elijah. Still others claimed he is a prophet, like one of the prophets of long ago. But when Herod heard this, he said, John, the man I beheaded, has been raised from the dead. So, what did Herod hear about first? It was all these miracles that Jesus was doing, particularly through his disciples. If you remember, in an earlier lesson, he had just sent out his disciples preaching and healing, performing miracles. But Herod, like many others, wondered about the identification, the ID of this man, Jesus. Unable to accept his claim to be God's own son, many made up their own explanations for his power, his authority. Herod thought that perhaps Jesus was John the Baptizer that he beheaded, come back to life. The people of the ancient world thought that departed spirits had supernatural powers. Herod may have thought that John had brought these powers back with him from the spirit world. But people had several thoughts on who Jesus was. Still do today, for that matter, but including those familiar with the Old Testament. Some thought that he might have been the resurrected Elijah, or at least one of the other Old Testament prophets like Moses or Isaiah or Jeremiah. I mean, we could go on, but uh, Jesus purposely kept away from Herod because he knew how dangerous and scheming this Roman governor was. Not to mention his wife, Herodias, right? But Herod apparently never saw Jesus face to face until, the day of Jesus' crucifixion in Luke chapter 23, starting verse 8. It says, When Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased because for a long time he had been wanting to see him, probably since John the Baptist. But from what he had heard about him, he hoped to see him perform some miracle. He plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there, vehemently accusing him. When then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him, dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. That day, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they had been enemies. Uh, People in the ancient world had to make up their mind exactly who Jesus was, just as we do today. Was he actually who he claimed to be? Did the evidence support his claims? Still, some made the wrong identification. Some just thought he was an ordinary man. Others thought he was some Old Testament prophet come back to life. They had various excuses on why they believed what they believed. Very few really listened to his claims. Today, people still have to make up their minds about Jesus. Some think that if they can name what he is, a prophet, a teacher, a good moral man, they can weaken the power of his true claim, who he actually is. But what they think really doesn't matter, and certainly doesn't change who Jesus really is. He is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And may we take that to heart today. I pray that you make the right choice about the identification of Jesus. I pray that this lesson's been a blessing. May God bless you and keep you and give you peace till we can meet here again and study the Word of God.